They are dead, aren't they?
Just turn on those.
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
Randy. Maggie's all are dead. Where are you now? All right. Yeah, the police are here now. The police are here now.
Hold for a minute.
That's my brother.
Okay. When was the last time you were here with them? Or talked to them or anything like that?
It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but
Okay.
I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that.
Okay.
I rode around with Paul for 2 hours this afternoon in the pickup truck.
That's your son, Paul? Okay.
Somebody going to check them?
Yes, sir. They've already checked them.
They did check them?
Yes, sir.
This is official that they're dead?
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
I'm sorry.
No. You're fine.
I'm very sorry. Gotta call her parents.
What's her name?
Her name is Maggie Murdaugh. Margaret Brandstetter Murdaugh. How you doing?
What's her birthday?
9/15/68.
Okay. And what's your son's first name? You said Paul?
Paul Terry Murdaugh.
And what's his birthday?
Jason, do you have anybody
4.
coming through town that could stop and pick up that tent? I see lighting off in the distance.
What are they covering them up?
I got some getting dressed now, Sheriff. I'll have somebody stop and grab it.
Tell them they don't have to do that. They don't need to.
What if I told you that the most dangerous man in a small southern town was never the one lurking in the shadows, but the one shaking hands in the courthouse, arguing cases before judges, and carrying a last name that opened every door that ever existed in Hampton County, South Carolina? What if I told you that for nearly 2 decades, this man maneuvered inside a legal system built in part by his own bloodline? A man who had seen the inside of more courtrooms than most lawyers ever will, who understood exactly how investigations worked, exactly how evidence was gathered, and exactly what it took to walk away from serious accusations without consequence. And what if I told you that when the bodies of his own wife and son were found on a warm June night in 2021, this same man, this attorney, this patriarch, this third-generation legal dynasty, was the one who made the 911 call? His name is Murdaugh. And this is the story of how the man who controlled every room he ever walked in finally walked into the one room he could not control, a courtroom where the power of the Murdaugh name meant absolutely nothing. Stay with us, because this story does not unfold the way you expect it to. It twists, it turns, and by the end, you're going to be sitting there asking yourself a question that has haunted this case since the very beginning. A question that the verdict alone could not fully answer. Before we go any further, if you're the kind of person who refuses to accept surface-level answers, who digs beneath the headlines, who wants to understand not just what happened but why and how and what it means, then you are exactly why this channel exists. Dark Trail Files is where we follow the evidence into the darkest corners of the most complex criminal cases. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on your notifications. Because once we go down this trail together, you will never want to find your way back. This is the kind of content that keeps you up at night. And we promise, it is worth every single sleepless hour. To understand Murdaugh, you first have to understand the world he was born into. Not just the town, not just the family, the entire ecosystem that had been built around a single last name across 3 generations. Hampton County sits in the rural lowcountry of South Carolina. It is not a wealthy county. It is not a large county. In 2021, the population hovered around 19,000 people. There are towns in America that have more people in a single apartment complex than live in all of Hampton County. And yet, for nearly a century, One family held a grip on this small, quiet place that reached far beyond anything its population size might suggest. The Murdaugh family had served as the elected solicitors, the chief prosecutors, for the 14th Judicial Circuit of South Carolina for an almost unbroken stretch spanning decades. Alec's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh I, held the position. Then his grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh II. Then his father, Randolph Murdaugh III, known simply as Buster. The family also ran the prominent personal injury law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltsroth, and Dietrich, known locally as PMPD, for generations. For most of the 20th century and into the 21st, if you were charged with a crime in Hampton County, the prosecutor's office had a Murdaugh name attached to it. If you were injured in an accident, you went to the Murdaugh firm. If you were a judge, a law enforcement officer, a politician, you knew the Murdaughs. You respected the Murdaughs, or you were careful not to make enemies of them. This was not a family with influence. This was a family woven into the very fabric of justice in that part of the state. Alec Murdaugh grew up fully immersed in that world. He attended the University of South Carolina for both his undergraduate and law degrees. He joined a family firm. He became a partner. He tried cases. He won settlements. He built a reputation as a tenacious, effective personal injury attorney who had an almost supernatural ability to connect with juries and negotiate with opposing counsel. Professionally, Alec Murdaugh was formidable. He was charming. He was well-connected. He knew how the game was played because he had been watching it being played his entire life. Courtrooms were comfortable spaces for him the way a kitchen is comfortable for a trained chef. Familiar, controlled, navigable. And outside of court, he maintained the image of a family man. He and his wife Margaret, known to everyone as Maggie, had been together since their college years. They had 2 sons. Paul, the younger boy, had a love of the outdoors, hunting, and the water. The family owned a large hunting property called Moselle in Islandton, South Carolina, nearly 1,700 acres of land where the family kept horses, dogs, and spent much of their private time. By every visible measurement, Alec Murdaugh was a man who had everything: legacy, wealth, power, family, property. But beneath all of that, beneath the handshakes and the courtroom victories and the carefully maintained surface of respectability, things were coming apart in ways that most people in Hampton County had no idea about. The first significant crack in the Murdaugh image did not come from a murder investigation. It came from a much smaller story. At least, it seemed small at the time. In February of 2019, Paul Murdaugh was involved in a fatal boating accident on the Beaufort River in South Carolina. He was 19 years old at the time. The boat he was piloting struck a bridge, and the crash resulted in the death of a 19-year-old young woman named Mallory Beach. Several other passengers were injured. Witnesses and legal proceedings would eventually address questions about whether Paul had been drinking that night, about who exactly was responsible, and about how the investigation into the incident was handled. Civil lawsuits were filed by the families of those involved. And in the months and years that followed, those civil lawsuits began to create serious financial and reputational pressure on the Murdaugh family. The Mallory Beach case would later become one of the threads investigators pulled when they try to understand what happened at the Moselle property on the night of June 7th, 2021, but that is getting ahead of the story. What we know, what the evidence established, is that Alec Murdaugh had a serious opioid addiction that had been hidden from almost everyone around him for more than 20 years. He was spending enormous sums of money to feed that addiction, and he had, over a period of years, been stealing from clients of his law firm, diverting settlement funds meant for vulnerable people into accounts he controlled. The scale of that financial misconduct, which would eventually be formally charged, ran into millions of dollars. The man who walked into every room with confidence and command was carrying secrets that were growing heavier and more dangerous with each passing month. By mid-2021, those secrets were very close to the surface. June 7th, 2021, a Monday evening at the Moselle property. Alec Murdaugh's account of that night, at least his initial account, placed him away from the kennels area of the property in the early evening hours. His mother was ill, he said. He had plans to visit her. He left the property at approximately 9 in the evening, He stated after having last seen Maggie and Paul alive. At approximately 10:07 that night, a 911 call was made from the property. What you're about to hear is one of the most analyzed pieces of audio in this entire case. Listen carefully, not just to the words, but to the pauses, the tone, the rhythm of what is being said. Investigators listened to this call hundreds of times. Grief experts studied it, and what they found raises questions that words alone cannot fully answer.
I'd like to play, Doug, the Colleton County portion of the 911 call, which is in evidence as Defendant's Exhibit Number 9.
2021, 22 hours, 7 minutes, 9 seconds.
I'm still here, okay?
Colleton County Communication.
Congressman, I have an Alex Murdaugh on the line calling from 4147 Murdaugh Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot.
Okay, and sir, give me the address again.
It's 4147 Moselle Road. I've been up to it now. It's bad.
Okay, how did they shoot?
When you say I've been up to it now and it's bad, what are you referring to?
I'm talking about what I saw was what y'all saw pictures of, and I mean, it was bad. It was terrible. And when I first got there, I know I got out of the car. I mean, I knew. Got out of the car, but right at first, I don't think I went all the way to them. I think I ran back and that's when I called 911. And so I called 911, and while I was doing that, then is when I went to Maggie and I went to Paul. And so that's what I think I'm talking about.
Keep going, please.
Do it now. It's bad.
Okay, how did they shoot? Did they shoot themselves?
Oh, no. Hell no.
Okay, and are they breathing?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son?
My wife and my son.
Are they in a vehicle?
No, ma'am. They're on the ground out at my kennels.
Okay, and did you see anyone?
He shot in the head, and he shot really bad. He shot
Okay, where is he shot at?
Ma'am, I don't know, but there's blood everywhere. I can see his brain. Face down. I tried to turn her a little bit, but she's got a hole in her head.
Okay, is he breathing at all?
No, nobody.
Okay, do you see anything? Do you see anyone in the area?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No.
Is there any guns near them at all?
No, there's here.
What color is your house on the outside?
If that's what you're asking, they didn't shoot themselves, ma'am.
What?
Alec, right in there, you say the word here. What? Are you calling anybody or anything?
No, I'm talking to that dispatcher.
And what did you mean when you said here?
If you listen to that call, one of the first things she asked me was, did they shoot themselves? And I knew there's no way. I mean, I knew they didn't shoot themselves. There wasn't a gun. They didn't shoot themselves. And she'd asked me that. And then she asked me another question, something about that. And you hear me say here, and then you hear the thing talking. I'm telling her here, and then I say something, and then you hear me say, if that's what you're asking. And I'm letting her know they didn't shoot themselves. I'm saying here, and then I give her an explanation, which you can't hear on that phone, but it's obvious to me what I'm doing. and I say, if that's what you're asking me. Like David Owens asked me on August 11th, did I call a dog or was I talking to somebody? There was no dog that was out, and there was nobody there.
Talk about that briefly. Well, when you got there and you saw Maggie and Paul, where were the dogs?
The dogs were in the kennels. Dogs were in the kennels. They were wherever they were when law enforcement got there.
And you've seen pictures, and they called Dale Davis to the stand and talk about the hose rolled up. Did you roll the hose up?
No.
Did you do anything down there at the kennels when you got there other than call 911 and attend to Maggie and Paul?
No, I do know that I was trying to find a flashlight. I was trying to find a gun. Other than those things, no, I didn't do anything at the kennel. I didn't do anything with any hose. I didn't do anything with any dogs.
Was there anybody with you?
No.
Keep going, please.
It's white. You can't see it from the road.
Okay, is it a house or a mobile home?
It's a house.
Okay, and what is your name?
My name is Alex Murdaugh.
Okay, did you hear anything, or did you come home and find out?
I've been gone. I just came back.
Okay, and was anyone else supposed to be at your house?
No, ma'am. Please hurry.
We're getting somebody out there to you.
Oh, man. Oh, should have known.
Alec, we just heard you say, I should have known. What are you referring to?
I said, Paul, I should have known.
What were you referring to?
I was referring to Paul got so many threats. Didn't take serious. Think twice about. So I'm just telling him, Paul, I should have known. I don't specifically remember saying that, but I can clearly hear myself say that.
What kind of threats did you understand Paul was receiving?
I mean, Paul got the most vile threats. I mean, the stuff that was on social media, I mean, it was, you couldn't believe it. You couldn't believe it.
Keep going, please, Doug.
Okay, what is her name?
Maggie and Paul.
Maggie is her name?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When's the last time you talked to Maggie?
Hour and a half ago, probably 2 hours ago.
What? Okay, you said about 2 hours ago you talked to them?
Approximately, yes, ma'am, approximately.
You were asked the last time you saw them, and you said hour and a half to 2 hours ago, and then she followed up 2 hours ago. You just heard that?
I did hear that. And I said approximately to her question.
When was the last time you saw them, Maggie and Paul?
Right after I took the chicken from Bubba.
The video we've seen is timestamp 8:44 p.m. Is that correct?
That's right.
So was it shortly after 8:44?
It was.
And then you called 911. There are records of that, but do you remember roughly 9:07 or right before 9:07?
I mean, I've seen the records and seen the transcripts, yeah.
And then this is, and the records of this, but this is some minutes into the conversation with 911 operators, correct?
That's right. Like,
knowing everything we know now, I mean, was it roughly an hour and a half the last time you saw him?
it was. That would, with the time of however long it took to get to this point, however many minutes that is 10:10 to 10, however many, you can look exactly and see what point this is and know what time it is, but it's between 10 and 10:15. And so I'd seen them around 8:45, a little bit after.
Alec Murdaugh called 911 and told the dispatcher that he had returned to the property and found his wife and son lying on the ground near the kennels. He said there was blood. He said they had been shot. Responding officers arrived to find Maggie Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh deceased. The nature of the scene, the location of the bodies near the dog kennels on the property, and the type of wounds they had sustained would become central to everything that followed. Maggie had been shot multiple times with what forensic analysis would later identify as a rifle. Paul had been shot with a shotgun. The combination of weapons used was significant. It pointed to a deliberate, targeted act, not a random encounter. Now here's where the story gets deeply complicated and where the details matter enormously. Shortly after law enforcement arrived at the scene, an individual who worked as a housekeeper for the Murdaugh family provided information that investigators found critical. Her account of what she had seen and heard that evening would become one of the most discussed pieces of testimony in the entire trial. The testimony you are about to hear comes from someone who knew this family closely, someone who was present at the property that evening and who experienced something that she did not fully understand the significance of until much later. Her words are quiet, but what she describes is anything but.
When I got inside, I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't do anything. I walked through the front door and I went in the kitchen. And I was kind of, when I looked in the kitchen, I kind of just stopped in my tracks and I looked at the stove, and I was kind of, I don't know what the word is. When I looked and I noticed the stove, that there was no pots on the stove, it was kind of unusual, because usually when they ate dinner the night before, the pots usually stayed on the stove. Very, very seldom would she put, certain meals in the refrigerator. A lot of times it was just left on the stove until the next day. And the pots were not in the sink, and they were not on the stove. And then as I walked through, if you walk through the kitchen, like you're going to, from the kitchen, if you walk through the kitchen, if you go to the left, there's two freezer and a refrigerator, and the laundry room sat right there to the left. There's a back door to the back porch, and then there's the laundry room door. They're both right there. And as I turned to go to the laundry room, I noticed that her pajamas were in the middle of the doorway, right in the middle, laid neatly in the middle of the doorway going into the laundry room. It was her pajama pants, a pair of underwear, and her pajama top.
Was that unusual?
That was very unusual.
Why?
Because she wouldn't lay her clothes out like that, not in the middle of the door like that. It just didn't look right to me.
And you took care of the house?
Yes.
You took care of the clothes?
Yes.
And not to get too personal, but sometimes you can't help it. Were the underwear there with the pajamas unusual?
Yes.
Why?
She didn't wear underwear with her pajamas.
No underwear with pajamas. But that struck you.
No underclothes with the pajamas.
But that struck you as unusual. They were there with the pajamas.
Yes, sir, because the underwear appeared to be clean, not dirty. They still had like fold marks.
And the pots, and I may have just missed it. You said, where would the pots end up when you found them?
After I looked at the pajamas on the floor, the way that they were set, I turned around and I said, well, I wonder where the pots are. So I happened to I opened the refrigerator door, and the pots were sitting inside the refrigerator with lids on them. And I was like, you know, who did this? I don't know at that point, but that was not normal for the whole pot to be sitting in the fridge.
Did you make any other observations in the house, the bathroom, or anywhere else?
In the master bathroom was her clothes were sitting next to the tub. It was a small pile of clothes right next to the tub. And by the shower, if you walk in the master bedroom, there's a big garden tub, spa type tub. And then right here is the shower, and there's a window. On the floor next to the shower was a slight puddle of water, a towel, and a pair of khaki pants. And then as I went to the left to see if there was anything else that was out, I looked in the closet, and in the closet was a white damp towel on the floor. It appeared that a t-shirt had fallen off of the stack of t-shirts that were on top of the shelf right there in the closet. It was laying on the floor next to the towel.
When you took care of the home, was that, tell us how the clothes were laid out, the shirts, the shorts were, you're saying up on a shelf, or the shirts, how were
in the closet there was a shelf. There was some shelves, smaller shelves right here, and then there was some long ones. Maggie used to keep her clothes on these. And then there was a shorter one, kind of like little box looking, you know, up. Alex used to keep his clothes, his belts and stuff in that. And then on top, there was also an area where he kept t-shirts. They were folded and they were kept on the shelf.
The housekeeper testified that she had been at the property that evening. And critically, she placed both Maggie and Paul near the kennels at a time that significantly overlapped with Alex's stated timeline of departure. This was important. This was very important. Because Alec Murdaugh had told investigators that he left the property before he believed anything had happened. That he left Maggie and Paul alive and well. But testimony placing him, or placing the victims, in a location and at a time that did not neatly align with his account began creating a gap. A small gap at first, but a gap that would widen with every piece of evidence that followed. Here is what investigators knew after the first few days. 2 people were dead. The weapons used were different. The location was remote and private. And the man who made the 911 call, the man who had just lost his wife and son, had a detailed account of where he had been and what he had been doing. But one very small detail did not fit. And in criminal investigations, it is always the small details that unravel everything. His cell phone data. The location data pulled from Alec Murdaugh's phone did not support his claim that he had left the property well before the shootings occurred. Cell tower records and phone data placed him at or near the kennels area. The precise location where Maggie and Paul were found, at a time that overlapped directly with the estimated time of their deaths. When investigators confronted Alec Murdaugh with this data, he changed his story. He now admitted that he had, in fact, been at the kennels that evening. He had gone to see the dogs. He had spoken briefly with Maggie and Paul, and then he had left. This admission, this change in the story, was a seismic moment in the investigation. Because it meant that the original account, the one he gave on the night of the murders and in the days that followed, had been false. And the question that followed that revelation has never fully gone away. Why did he lie about being at the kennels? When law enforcement sits across from a man who has spent his entire professional life inside the legal system, a man who knows interrogation tactics, who understands how statements can be used, who has watched countless witnesses be questioned and cross-examined, that interrogation takes on a very different character than most. Alec Murdaugh was not an ordinary suspect. He was an attorney. He understood, better than almost anyone, what was happening in that room, what investigators were looking for, and what his words could mean in a future proceeding. The video you are about to see is not dramatic in the way Hollywood portrays these moments. It is something much more unsettling than that. It is a trained legal mind navigating a situation that no amount of legal training could have fully prepared him for. Watch the moments when the questions get specific. Watch what happens when investigators push.
I hate to have to do this.
I understand.
Yeah.
I totally
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
So you don't have any problem
Yeah.
with it.
So, just start at the top, take your time.
Like when I came back here, I mean, I pulled up and I could see him, and you know, I knew something was bad. I ran out. I knew it was really bad. And my boy over there, I could see it was.
Sorry.
And I could see his brain on his. And I ran over to Maggie, and actually, I think I tried to turn Paul over first. You know, I tried to turn him over, and I don't know, I figured it out. His cell phone popped out of his pocket. I started to try to do something with it, thinking maybe, but then I put it back down really quickly. Then I went to my wife, and I mean, I could see.
Did you touch Maggie at all?
I did. I touched them both.
Okay.
I tried to take, I tried to do it as limited as possible, but I tried to take their pulse on both of them. And, you know, I called 911 pretty much right away, and she was very good. I talked to her. I told her I was going to get off the phone to call some family members. I did that.
What family members did you call?
I called my brother Randy, and I called my brother John. And I tried to call a little boy, real good friend that's right around the corner from here, but I didn't get him.
Okay. What all was around Paul when you walked up?
Blood.
Anything else?
I mean, there were some body things, yes, sir.
I mean, like any other evidence? I know you said the phone fell out the pocket, but did you see anything else that didn't belong or shouldn't belong or that wasn't part of Paul?
No, sir, not the, no, sir.
How about Maggie?
No, sir.
You didn't see anything around them? What made you come out here tonight?
I went to, my mom's a late stage Alzheimer's patient. My dad's in the hospital. My mom gets anxious when she does. I went to check on them and Maggie. Maggie's a dog lover, and she fools with the dogs. And I knew she'd gone to the kennel. I was at the house. I left the house and went to my mom's for just a little while. Tried to call her when I left. Texted her, no response. When I got back to the house was obviously nobody was in there, so I figured they're still up here fooling around. Paul was gonna be getting set up to plant. Our sunflower seeds got sprayed and died, and he was refiguring to plant the sunflower seeds.
Okay.
So I came back up here and I drove up and saw
and called.
Had Maggie and Paul been arguing over anything?
No.
What was their relationship like?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. How about yours and Maggie's?
Wonderful. I mean, I'm sure we had little things here and there, but we had a wonderful marriage, wonderful relationship.
And yours and Paul's relationship?
As good as it could be.
How old was Paul?
22.
Okay. You know his date of birth? Have you talked with any of these guys tonight?
Talked with Nolan, yes, sir.
Is he out here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I tried to call Rogan, was one of the people he's the boy that I told you lives around the corner.
Okay.
That's very, he's just a good, helpful young man. You mind if I open the door really quickly?
Go right ahead. Do what you need to do. So is there anybody that you can think of that we need to talk to tonight? Is there a name that comes to mind?
I mean, I can't tell you anybody that I'm overly suspicious of off the top of my head.
Okay.
I mean, this is such a stupid thing. I'm even embarrassed to say it. But it just didn't make any sense. I just hired a guy out here, and he wasn't cutting the mustard, but I hadn't told him this yet. Paul's been working with him a lot. He killed the sunflower seeds in our dove field just recently, which is why Paul was here doing this. He told Paul a story the other day about how when he was in high school, he got in a fight with some black guys. And the FBI undercover team observed him fighting those guys and put him on an undercover team with 3 Navy SEALs. And that their job was to kill radical Black Panthers. And they did that from Myrtle Beach to Savannah. Now, I really don't think this guy, is probably the person, but that's just so friggin'.
Yeah, that's kind of far-fetched story.
It's weird. But he was off today.
Okay.
He took his daddy to the doctor.
What's his name?
C.B. Rowe.
R-O-W-E?
Yeah, and I sent him a message to text me earlier today about the sunflowers, and he called me back when I was on the way to my mom's house.
Did you talk to him at that time?
Briefly, I was on the phone with a lawyer friend of mine named Chris Wilson from Bamberg, so I told him I'd call him back tomorrow, see him in the morning.
When you briefly talked to Mr. Rowe, what was his demeanor or attitude? Or
I mean, it seemed normal. I mean, I asked him about the sunflowers, and so, I'm sure he's a little bit.
Where does he live?
I don't exactly know. Somewhere in Bronson.
Okay. Do you have his phone number?
I do.
You got it with you, or closer?
I do. Last week, my son Paul actually, I really do not think, in all honesty, that it's him, but I know y'all got to check it out. But Paul was so taken aback by it that he sent, I'll find it, I got it on my phone. He recorded him saying bits and pieces of it.
Okay.
No. But for all his weirdness, I do think they got along pretty good.
How long had he been working here?
I guess about 3 or 4 pay periods, so 8 weeks, a couple months.
Okay. Going back to the boat incident, anybody on that boat really have a hard-on for Paul that you would think would come after him, or know of any direct threats from people on the boat?
I don't know of any direct threats between any of the people on the boat specifically, but I do think there's been a small amount of yip-yap between a couple of them, but not recently.
Okay.
Most of this was stuff from people that Paul didn't really know.
Okay.
It was some people that he knew distantly, but more times than not, when I learned about it, it was somebody that he didn't know.
Okay.
It's like, for example, he went out in Charleston a couple months ago, came back, he got a black eye. And, he can't defend himself right now because he has these charges. So, Paul was a real tough man's man.
Mm-hmm.
He would just...
He would defend himself, but he hadn't been...
That's right, but...
How was he handling that case, looming over everybody?
As far as what?
How was he handling it?
I've never been prouder of him than the way he has handled the pressures and the adversity in that situation. I think I've told Danny that before. I mean, Paul is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful kid. He can do almost anything. He gets along with almost anybody.
Do y'all store any weapons out here?
We don't store them, but they're frequently out here. I need to find out if there were any out here, because I know there was a shotgun. There was a 12-gauge shotgun out here. I'll have to find out exactly when that was. I think it got put up, but I'm not positive.
What did that shotgun look like?
It was a camouflage. I want to say it was a Benelli or maybe a Beretta. I can't remember which brand it is. But I don't think it was out here.
Okay.
Recently. But I'm not positive.
And the shotgun that you had when deputies pulled up, where did that come from?
I went to the house and I got a gun. Probably overreacting, but...
And was that when you pulled up and saw them?
No, I came out and, I called 911 first. Talked to them for a little while, and then I told her.
You told her?
That I was going to go to the house.
Okay.
And that I would let authorities know when they got here that I had a gun.
Okay. Do you happen to have a list of all your guns?
I can make one. I don't have one, but I can make one.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, so we could compare if that shotgun was out here and now it's missing.
Absolutely.
Try to figure that out.
No, absolutely.
And I know living out here in the country, you probably have more than one or two.
We do. We probably have 20, 25 guns.
Yeah. Shotguns, rifles.
Pistols.
Any rifles?
Yes, sir.
And what kind of rifles?
All kinds.
Yeah.
All kinds. You name it, across the board, we have them.
Okay.
And all of them we have are, in a hunting room in our house.
Laura, you got anything?
This one's hard, but when you first saw Paul, you said you tried to flip him over. Was he laying on his back or on his stomach?
Just like he is.
Just like he is. So you weren't able to move him. Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay. And did he help Maggie a lot out here with the animals?
He helped everybody with everything.
Okay, so it was kind of routine for him to be out here as well in the evening?
This place is his absolute passion.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So, just to kind of let you know what's going to go on, we're going to be out here for quite some time. The coroner will take custody of Paul and Maggie.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What? No, let me, we're finished. Let me come out. Well, I'll be here when he gets here. No, don't let him come up here. Okay, yeah. I think we're about done. All right, thank you. So, I'm sorry.
Buster, get in here. Okay.
Yes, sir. I dropped my card.
We'll get you one.
Sorry.
I'll get you one.
Here you go.
Thank you.
So the coroner will come over and talk to you. They'll do the autopsy and everything, and then go from there.
Thank you.
But we'll come to you before we leave.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you, Miss Rutland.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
What the interrogation footage reveals, when analyzed carefully, is a man working very hard to present a coherent and consistent narrative, and occasionally showing the strain of that effort. His tone shifts. His pacing of speech changes when certain questions are raised. There are moments where the confident attorney appears to recede, and something else, something more uncertain and more cautious, takes his place. The change in his story about the kennels was not the only inconsistency investigators identified. As the investigation deepened, a pattern emerged of statements Alec had made that could not be reconciled with physical evidence. One of the most significant was a video. A brief video captured on Paul Murdaugh's phone that evening. A Snapchat video plays Paul at the kennels at approximately 8:44 in the evening. And the voices audible in the background of that video included what sounded clearly to investigators and analysts like Alec Murdaugh's voice. This was direct evidence that Alec was at the kennels with Paul and Maggie at a time that fell within the estimated window of the deaths, and before the time he initially claimed to have left the property. When this was established, his initial account did not just become suspicious. It became something investigators and prosecutors would describe as provably false. When the trial of Alec Murdaugh for the murders of his wife and son began in January of 2023 in Colleton County, South Carolina, the case had been moved from Hampton County due to concerns about the Murdaugh family's influence in that jurisdiction. The world was watching. Cameras were in the courtroom. The proceedings were broadcast. People across the country and around the world tuned in to watch a man who had spent his career inside the justice system face the full weight of that same system from the opposite side of the courtroom. From the opening moments of the trial, the prosecution established the framework of their case. Alec Murdaugh was a man facing financial ruin and professional exposure. His decades-long theft from clients and his firm was about to be discovered. His addiction was spiraling. The civil lawsuits related to the boating death of Mallory Beach were advancing in ways that threatened to expose the full scope of his financial misconduct. He needed, the prosecution argued, a distraction. He needed the sympathy of the community. He needed to reposition himself from a man about to be exposed as a fraudulent attorney into a man who had suffered an unimaginable personal tragedy. The defense took a different approach. They argued that Alec Murdaugh was a deeply flawed man, an addict, a thief, a liar, but that he was not a killer. They argued that the same darkness that had consumed his professional life did not translate into the capacity for violence against the people he loved most. And Alec Murdaugh himself took the stand. What you are about to see is a moment that stopped this trial in its tracks. Alec Murdaugh, a man who had spent his career measuring words in courtrooms, now found himself searching for them. Watch the jury, watch the attorneys, and watch what happens in the seconds that follow the tears.
Large amount of blood around each of them, as well as brain matter.
Did you ultimately have a conversation with Mr. Murdaugh when you were out there?
I did.
All right. And do you see him here in the courtroom today, the person that you talked to?
I do.
And can you point him out to the jury, please?
Yes, sir. He's right there, wearing a dark blue or black jacket.
Your Honor, can the record reflect that he's identified Mr. Murdaugh?
It does.
When you ultimately approached Mr. Murdaugh, what's the first thing that you did?
The first thing I did was ensure that he did not have any weapons on him. That's standard procedure for arriving on a scene like that. Any kind of weapons that are anywhere on the scene, I want to be aware of just so I can know whether they're there or not, and if they are there, who has access to them at any point. And that's for my safety as well as other responding officers and for anyone else that's on scene.
Did Mr. Murdaugh give you any possible explanation for this when you approached him?
His immediate reaction was to start telling me about an incident that had happened with his son.
His emotional moments on the stand became one of the most discussed aspects of the entire trial. He wept when speaking about Maggie and Paul. He described their relationship in terms that were tender and specific and detailed. He spoke about Maggie's laugh and Paul's energy and what their loss had done to him. But observers, including behavioral experts and jurors who later spoke about their experiences, noted something that was difficult to ignore. The tears came and went. The emotion appeared, intensified, and then, at certain moments, seemed to recede. Not gradually, the way grief tends to ebb and flow, but sometimes abruptly, sometimes in a way that felt transitional rather than spontaneous. The question of whether what Alec Murdaugh showed in court was genuine emotional pain or something more calculated is one that the jury grappled with deeply. This next clip shows a moment where he addresses his own statements about the people he says he could never have harmed. Ask yourself, does what he says match what you've already seen?
One more thing, JJ, going back, I do want to tell you as to how close I feel to you. My wife loved you, and you are absolutely right about everything you said, but you are dead wrong about one thing, and I would never hurt Maggie, and I would never hurt Paul. And it is important to me that you know that, because she did love you, and I hope you know that. And I hope you know that I mean what I say here today.
His assertion that he would never, could never, harm Maggie and Paul was delivered with force and clarity. But by that point in the trial, the prosecution had already laid out an extensive case connecting him to the scene, to the timeline, and to a motive built on financial desperation and the imminent threat of public exposure. And the jury was watching carefully. Here is something that doesn't often get enough attention in the public conversation about this case. The jury did not deliberate for weeks. They did not wrestle with the evidence for days. After hearing weeks of testimony, mountains of forensic and circumstantial evidence, multiple expert witnesses, and Alec Murdaugh's own account from the stand, the jury returned their verdict in just 3 hours. 3 hours. In a case of this complexity, with this many moving parts, with this much testimony and this much evidence, the 12 people tasked with deciding Alec Murdaugh's fate needed only 3 hours to reach a unanimous decision. What did they see that made the conclusion feel so clear? What had the weeks of evidence communicated to them in a way that required only 3 hours of deliberation? We will get to that. But first, the defense theory that was supposed to give them reasonable doubt. The theory that an expert witness dismantled piece by piece, fact by fact, in front of the entire courtroom. The defense, in trying to create reasonable doubt, had to offer an alternative explanation for what happened to the Moselle kennels on the night of June 7th, 2021. They had to suggest a possibility, even without proving it, that someone else could have committed these acts. Their theory pointed toward unknown individuals who may have had reason to target the Murdaugh family, possibly connected to the boating death of Mallory Beach and the civil litigation that followed. They suggested that on a large rural property, it was not impossible for armed individuals to gain access, commit the acts, and leave without detection. The defense also addressed the forensic evidence, arguing that elements of the crime scene and the physical evidence were not as conclusive as the prosecution suggested. And then the state called Dr. Kenny Kinsey to the stand. Dr. Kinsey was a forensic pathology expert with extensive credentials and experience. His role was to address the physical evidence from the crime scene, specifically the wounds, the trajectory of the shots, the positions of the bodies, and what the forensic science could and could not tell us about what happened that night. What you are about to see is a moment that many analysts of this trial identify as the turning point. The moment when the defense theory came apart not through argument or rhetoric, but through science. Dr. Kinsey does not raise his voice. He does not editorialize. He simply walks through the evidence. And the defense theory, piece by piece, does not survive the walk.
You had an opportunity to hear the defense's theory on how Paul was shot, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
I would like to demonstrate that with you right now.
Yes, sir.
Can you walk us through the defense's theory as you understood it to be?
Yes, sir, I can.
Your Honor, for purposes of this demonstration, I don't know if the court would allow it, but it'd be nice if we could open this door. I want to make sure that there's security here, but if we could have that door open just for a minute or two.
Can you open that door?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm grabbing what Smart states Exhibit 4, which is a camo Benelli Super Black Eagle 3 shotgun 12 gauge. We'll use this for the demonstration, so step down. Now, is this door the same width as the feed room door?
It's a couple inches wider than the feed room door.
And of course, the feed room door doesn't have this, it's inset, correct?
That is correct.
So this is not exactly a replication of what happened at the feed room door, correct?
No, sir, it's not. The door swings the same direction, though.
Now, you have given me permission. I'm very careful about muzzle velocity. Muzzle awareness. But you've given me permission to point this at you, correct?
I have.
Okay. You actually asked me to, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. So go in there and stand a couple of feet back. It doesn't have to be 5 feet. But you have since testified that Paul was 5 feet inside the feed room, correct?
Can we demonstrate the first shot out here?
I am.
I believe they are.
All right, stand back a little bit because you got to stumble toward me.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to point like I'm pointing at you.
Yes, sir.
Paul is shot. Where's the shooter approximately outside the door?
The breech face or the ejection port of the shotgun is just past the door frame.
Okay, Paul has just been shot.
Yes, sir.
And in the defense's theory, you tell me what to do, and you act this out, and I'm going to do what you tell me to do based on the defense's theory of the case.
The defense agreed with the assessment that Paul stood there for a moment, bleeding down his injured left arm, and he slowly walked toward the door.
Okay, and what does the shooter do?
The shooter's coming in the door.
And then what does the shooter do?
He shoots Paul in the back of the head after he passes him.
Okay, and then shoots Paul in the back of the head like this, and where does the blood spatter go?
The blood spatter, the pellet defects, and one that I didn't know about that the expert collected was in the door frame at the top of the door.
Now I understand this is a little different than the feed room door. That's the best we can do. So what did you find odd about the theory, first of all?
I think the theory is preposterous, in my opinion.
Can you walk me through why you think it's preposterous?
Absolutely. Number one, that dry lock number 2 shot shell fires a projectile at 1,450 feet per second once it leaves the muzzle of that weapon. As was mentioned, that's a millisecond. That's fast. To think that the pressure from flesh and bone will cause that pellet, those steel pellets now. We're not talking about lead. Lead's a little bit more giving. Lead is malleable. It will crush or flatten. We're talking about steel, BB pellets. They will turn around because of the pressure, go back the opposite direction, 180-degree direction at enough velocity to dent a steel exterior door and embed in the door frame. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen, in my opinion.
I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but can you talk about, make sure I get it right.
And can I add?
Please do.
Also, there's no defects to the OSB or the T111 siding in the bottom of the room.
All right, wait a second. You said a lot right there.
Yes, sir.
TS what?
TS111. It's like a exterior paneling that people put on their buildings. That's what's on the building.
For all us city boys, we appreciate you describing that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. It's a whole weather paneling. There's no defects at the bottom, and if that theory is correct, if this is an entrance and this is an exit, the shot still had to go somewhere. There's no defects down there on anything. The door frame, as I mentioned in my previous testimony, the door frame has a clean void. That would be perfectly in line with those shot from that shot shell. There's no cracks, chips, pellet holes in the cement. There's nothing in the OSB. That's cheap plywood. That's man-made plywood. There's no defects in the plywood. There's no high-velocity blood spatter on the floor. What was pointed out to you is medium velocity, and that's from coming out of the wound and gravity bringing it down to the floor. You would see a pattern on the floor just like what you can see in the photographs at the top of that door. None of that's there. So I have to look at the science, and I have to look at inertia, and I have to look at that shot shell and how fast that shell is propelled out of that barrel, and I know that it can't turn around 180 degrees and go back the other direction. It's not like blood and tissue. We're talking about steel pellet.
What Dr. Kinsey established through his testimony was a detailed forensic picture of the events at the kennels that was fundamentally incompatible with the defense's alternative theory. The trajectory of the shots, the positions of the victims, the distribution of physical evidence at the scene. All of these elements, when analyzed together, told a story that pointed not to random, unknown attackers moving through the property under cover of darkness, but to a deliberate, up-close encounter. The forensic evidence placed the shooter or shooters at close range. The nature of the wounds and their locations on the bodies told a story about the sequence of events and the positions of everyone involved. This was not the evidence profile of a quick attack by individuals unfamiliar with the space. This was the evidence profile of something else entirely. And crucially, the two different weapons used, a rifle and a shotgun, were weapons consistent with the type of firearms kept on a hunting property like Moselle. They were not weapons that randomly arriving attackers would typically bring together. But they were exactly the kind of weapons that someone who knew that property intimately would have immediate, practiced access to. Dr. Kinsey's testimony did not fill every gap. Forensic science rarely does. But it did what the prosecution needed it to do. It took the defense's alternative explanation and showed, systematically, why the physical evidence did not support it. From the very beginning of the trial, the prosecution made clear that they were going to tell this story in a specific way. They were not going to rely on any single piece of dramatic evidence. They were going to construct a case out of many smaller pieces, a web of circumstantial evidence, forensic analysis, testimony, and documented lies that, taken together, they argued could only point to one conclusion. The opening statement in a criminal trial is the first real opportunity the jury has to understand what they are about to experience. The prosecution used their opening to draw a portrait, not just of a crime, but of a man, a family, a dynasty, and a desperate moment when all of it came crashing down. What they said in those opening minutes set the tone for everything that followed.
On the evening of June 7th, 2021, at the defendant's property off Moselle Road in Colleton County, his son Paul Murdaugh was standing in a small feed room and some kennels they had on the property. about 8:50 p.m., and the defendant over there, Alec Murdaugh, took a 12-shade shotgun and shot him in the shoulder, in the chest and the shoulder with buckshot. And the evidence is going to show it was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. He could have survived that, but after that, another shot went up under his head and did catastrophic damage to his brain and his head. The evidence is going to show that Paul collapsed right outside that feed room. And just moments later, he picked up a .300 Blackout, which is a type of ammunition, but an AR-style rifle. And the evidence is going to show that the family had multiple weapons throughout the property. Picked up that .300 Blackout rifle and opened fire on his wife, Maggie, just feet away near some sheds that used to be a hangar. Pow, pow. 2 shots, abdomen in the leg, and took her down. And after that, there were additional shots, including 2 shots to the head that again did catastrophic damage and killed her instantly. The evidence is going to show that neither Paul nor Maggie had any defensive wounds. Neither one of them had any defensive wounds, as if they didn't see a threat coming from their attacker. And the evidence is also going to show that both Maggie and Paul were shot at extremely close range. The evidence is going to show it's called stippling. It's almost like a tattoo, that when you get shot very close to a weapon, it leaves marks that the forensic pathologist can see. They were shot at close range and they did not have defensive wounds. The kennels, the cell phones are going to show otherwise.
The prosecution's opening laid out the timeline and the motive with striking directness. They acknowledged from the start that Alec Murdaugh was a complicated person, that he had significant personal and professional problems, and that those problems were the key to understanding why the events of June 7th, 2021 occurred. Their argument was essentially this: Alec Murdaugh was days, perhaps weeks, away from having his financial crimes exposed by his law firm. The magnitude of what was about to be discovered was not small. It was not a minor accounting error. The amount of money that investigators would ultimately determine he had misappropriated from clients ran to approximately $8.8 million. When that exposure came, and it was coming, it would mean the end of everything. His career, his freedom, his name. The prosecution argued that in that moment of desperation, with the walls closing in, Alec Murdaugh made a decision that would set in motion the most consequential criminal case in South Carolina in a generation. Now here is the piece of this story that most people miss when they focus only on the murder trial. Because the murder trial was not the only thing Alec Murdaugh was facing. While the proceedings for the deaths of Maggie and Paul were unfolding, a parallel legal process was also advancing. The financial crimes, the theft from clients, the misappropriation of settlement funds meant for injured and grieving people who had trusted their attorney to act in their best interests. These are being prosecuted separately. The scale of what investigators found was staggering. Among the cases where funds were allegedly diverted were settlements connected to vulnerable clients, including, in a detail that struck many observers as particularly devastating, a case involving the family of the Murdaugh's own longtime housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. Gloria Satterfield had worked for the Murdaugh family for years. She died in February of 2018 following a fall at the Moselle property. A wrongful death claim was filed and settled. But the funds from that settlement, funds that should have gone to Gloria Satterfield's sons, were allegedly never properly delivered. Her sons, through subsequent legal proceedings, pursued the matter, and it became one of the documented examples of the alleged financial misconduct. The woman whose family worked for the Murdaughs, whose mother died on their property, whose settlement funds allegedly never reached her children. This detail is not a footnote. It is a window into the kind of operation that was being run beneath the professional surface of the Murdaugh legal enterprise. And it raises a question that the formal proceedings could only partially address. How long had this been going on, and how many people had been affected? On March 3rd, 2023, Alec Murdaugh stood in a South Carolina courtroom to be sentenced. The jury had spoken. The verdict was in. He had been convicted on 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. And now, in the same kind of room where he had spent his entire professional life, where the Murdaugh name had meant something specific and powerful and respected, it was time for the weight of that verdict to come down. Sentencing hearings are, in many ways, the most human moments in the criminal justice process. They are the moments when the abstract becomes real, when the verdict translates into what a life will look like from that point forward. What you are about to see is a man at the end of a very long fall.
And I have lived with this case now for over 2 years, and I have 34 days left before active retirement. And after imposing this sentence, your life will continue. I will turn the page and leave you behind. You're quite an enigma, a person that many of us thought we knew. And as I stated earlier, I can only recall you as being a fun-loving, happy person. I've never seen you sad. I've never seen you being anything other than a friendly, caring person. And it's so disappointing to see you again in this setting. I believe the last time we saw each other and you were not in jail was at a conference when you were poolside having a good time. And as it turns out, that was a couple of months after the passing of your wife and son. But you were having a good time, made nothing of it, and then the Labor Day weekend events occurred, and next thing I know, I'm assigned to preside over all of your matters. Not on your matters, but others as well. And we started out with over 100 charges, indictments against various folks, and we've whittled that down to just a handful outstanding. And I'm happy to turn the page and turn, not turn the remnants over to anyone else, but to certainly turn over anything pending against you to someone else. It's been said that these are white-collar offenses. I've never had that distinction. I've never thought of it that way. I've looked at criminal offenses as criminal offenses. You know, 3 property crimes in South Carolina is you can get 10 years in prison. People have gotten 10 years for shoplifting, 3rd offense. I've sent people into retirement for committing criminal offenses over and over and over again. But I've never thought of it as being a white-collar offense. Having had employees do embezzlement, church secretaries stole money, preachers stolen money, many offenses. But I never draw a distinction between a violent crime and other crimes. Certainly the law makes a distinction, and many violent crimes are non-parole offenses. The plea I'm accepting with you, you must serve 85% of the time. The parties have indicated that they are the victims, to the extent that they can be called victims there. That's my preferred term for the group of people who have been preyed upon or victimized. They've all indicated that they would like for the court to accept the negotiated sentence. It is a stern sentence, The question was asked, what kind of animal are you? You're an enigmatic person. I don't know that you understand yourself. What comes to mind is a young man that I sentenced to death penalty for killing a police officer and setting his body on fire. And though personally I was opposed to capital punishment, he was sentenced to death. And in writing up that sentence report, I concluded that he was heartless. He was just empty. And when I see you and I listen to you and I reflect on all that I've seen since being appointed, assigned to these cases, you come closest to that young man. Being empty, I don't see anything. I tried to reach you at sentencing in the other case. I've listened to you here today, and I don't see anything there. Hopefully something will emerge within your spirit, within your soul. Certainly, being a person of your age and intelligence and experience, you have a lot to offer to the people that you encounter on a daily basis in the institution, and I think it's admirable that you've indicated that you will help them and continue to try to do good by them. You'll certainly have a lot of opportunity to do that. As we look at it, all of us, none of us are perfect. Many of us do things that we shouldn't do. It's just unimaginable to me that you have done some of the things that you've done, and whether it's you or someone you become upon using drugs or through the process of just committing the crimes over and over the period of years. I don't know. I don't even know who I'm speaking to now. But being a person of power and influence, and the question is raised of what type of character do you have? A person who would prey upon folks who are vulnerable and who are of a lower perceived estate than you. How you would prey upon those people who you say you love. And you capitalize on a disparity of what you have versus what they had and what they need and what they desired. In my years, I know of no greater joy as a lawyer that I've had during my 47 years as a lawyer than the joy of having a satisfied client, of delivering good results for a client and experiencing that joy with them. I can think of no greater joy than I've experienced in being able to deliver on behalf of a client. And I'm sure you've experienced that joy as well until you decided that the only joy you're concerned about was your own. I take no joy at all in imposing this sentence, but it is what it is. And you'll have to suffer the consequences of your acts, continue to suffer the consequences, and hopefully some good will come out of you as you move forward.
Alec Murdaugh received 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. There would be no possibility of release. No future chapter where the Murdaugh name might reassemble itself. No path back to the world he had inhabited. The dynasty, 3 generations of legal power in Hampton County, South Carolina, ended in that courtroom on that day with those words. What was striking to many observers in the courtroom and watching remotely was not just the sentence itself. Life without parole was widely expected given the convictions, but the atmosphere of the room, the weight that seemed to hang over the proceedings. This was not a simple sentencing. This was the formal conclusion of one of the most extraordinary falls from power in the history of South Carolina. After the verdict, after the evidence, after the expert testimony and the tears and the changing stories, Alec Murdaugh himself had a chance to address the court one final time. His words at sentencing are the last documented statement he made in that original proceeding. They are worth hearing in full because they tell us something about a man who, even at this final moment, remained, in some important sense, himself.
I'm Alec Murdaugh, Murdaugh. Good morning.
Mr. Murdaugh, on June 7th, 2021, did you take this gun or any gun like it and shoot your son Paul in the chest in the feed room at your property off Moselle Road?
No, I did not.
Mr. Murdaugh, did you take this gun or any gun like it and blow your son's brains out on June 7th or any day or any time?
No, I did not.
Mr. Murdaugh, if you take a 300 blackout, such as this, and fire it into your wife Maggie's leg, torso, or any part of her body?
No, I did not.
Did you shoot a 300 blackout into her head, causing her death?
Mr. Griffin, I didn't shoot my wife or my son anytime. Ever.
Mr. Murdaugh, is that you on the kennel video at 8:44 p.m. on June 7th, the night Maggie and Paul were murdered?
It is.
Were you in fact at the kennels at 8:44 p.m. on the night Maggie and Paul were murdered?
I was.
Did you lie to Sled Agent Owen and Deputy Laura Rutland on the night of June 7th and told them that you stayed at the house after dinner?
I did lie to them.
Did you lie to Agent Owen and Agent Croft on the follow-up interview on June 10th that the last time you saw Maggie and Paul was at dinner?
I did lie to them.
And in the interview of August 11th, did you tell Agent Owen and Agent Croft, did you lie to them by telling them that you were not down at the kennels on that night?
Yes.
Alec, why did you lie to Agent Owen, Agent Croft, and Deputy Rutland about the last time you saw Maggie and Paul?
As my addiction evolved over time, I would get in these situations or circumstances where I would get paranoid thinking. And it could be anything that triggered it. It might be a look somebody gave me. It might be a reaction somebody had to something I did. It might be a policeman following me in a car.
He maintained his innocence, even at sentencing, even after the verdict, even with 2 consecutive life terms being handed down. He looked at the court and said that he did not do this. That moment, that insistence, that unwillingness to accept the verdict in any public, verbal way became one of the final, enduring images of this case. The man who had spent his career as an officer of the court standing inside the court and telling it that it was wrong. One of the most unexpected developments in the aftermath of the trial came from a direction almost no one had anticipated. Becky Hill, who served as the clerk of court for Colleton County during the trial, published a book about her experience. In it, she wrote about the case, the proceedings, and, in ways that became deeply controversial, about Alec Murdaugh himself. But the story took a sharp turn when allegations surfaced suggesting that Hill may have had improper communications with jurors during the trial. The nature of these allegations pointed to potential contact between the clerk's office and jury members in a way that could have influenced the deliberations. Alec Murdaugh's legal team filed a motion for a new trial, arguing that the conduct, if it occurred, had compromised the integrity of the proceedings and denied him his constitutional right to a fair trial. This is one of the most unexpected chapters of this entire case. Becky Hill, who had positioned herself publicly as a central figure in the story of the Murdaugh trial, found herself under scrutiny in a hearing that raised serious questions about her conduct. What she conceded in court was something that few who had followed the case saw coming.
You have described in your book your role as Switzerland, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that is that you should not be in any way opinionated about what's going on in the trial, is that correct?
That's true.
Okay. Yet in your book you indicated a number of different points during the trial you had concluded he was guilty, is that correct?
I think...
Your Honor, I object at this point. I don't know if her conclusions in the book are in any way relevant to what occurred during the trial and whether or not there was any communications with the jurors, which is the sole issue that we're here for today, is whether or not Ms. Hill had any extraneous influence on the jurors. And so I think this is going a little far afield. We object to the relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled. You may continue.
Let me give you an example. You indicate riding back from Moselle that you and 3 other people were in a car and you all decided adamantly, I think was the word you used, that he was guilty, that he had killed his wife and son. Is that what you put in the book?
I can't remember if I put that in the book, but if you say I did, then I will agree with you. Did that happen? We did have a conversation about what each of us thought.
And all 4 agreed that he was guilty, correct?
And none of us were jurors.
No, trust me, I know that. But you had an abiding conviction, at least by the time of the Moselle visit, that he was guilty. And the other people in the car with you were bailiffs, were they not?
No.
Who were they?
Some were not bailiffs. One was a court reporter. One was our security officer, head security, and another was a deputy sheriff.
Okay. But the 4 of y'all rode out there, and based on what, and I mean, you want me to read to you how chilled you were and how you felt that poor Paul and Maggie had been executed by him on that scene, that visiting the scene convinced you that he was a horrible, horrible murderer? You want me to read that to you, or you will concede that's what you wrote?
I will concede that's what I wrote, but if I may, I would say that a lot of that is poetic license in writing a book and in making it sound like that. Okay, so some of it's poetic license, and some of it you just stole. You purloined it from that BBC writer, right?
Right, again, I object to not only the relevance, but the scope of cross. I would object also under Rule 608. I don't believe that that's appropriate cross-examination.
Overruled. You may continue, Mr. Harpootlian.
Did you steal part of the book?
I did plagiarize,
Okay,
Mr. Harpootlian.
that's stealing, isn't it?
And it is, and for
Okay.
that I'm very sorry, and I have apologized.
Okay. And that makes it okay?
What I did, and I apologized for that.
And part of the book is, you say, literary license, exaggeration?
I wouldn't call it exaggeration.
Okay. Now let me ask you this, is Switzerland, and this is, you're saying this is happening while you're supposed to be Switzerland, you decided the defendant's guilty. And if Ms. McElmeen says that it's going to make you more money if he's found guilty, don't you think it's reasonable to assume that you may have crossed the line from time to time?
Your Honor, I object to the form of the question, assuming facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
Can you repeat that question one more time,
I'm
Mr.
not going to
Hartfield?
repeat it. Let me just move on to something else.
At a hearing related to the motion for a new trial, Becky Hill acknowledged that her book had characterized Alec Murdaugh in extremely negative terms, in ways that went beyond what the evidence at trial had established. She conceded, under questioning, that some of the framing in her book went further than the facts supported. This acknowledgement did not resolve the question of whether jurors had been improperly influenced. The matter triggered a formal investigation into Hill's conduct during the trial, including a state grand jury inquiry that examined the specific allegations that she may have communicated messages to jurors about the case. In August of 2024, it was reported that the investigation into Becky Hill's conduct had found no evidence sufficient to support criminal charges against her. The South Carolina Supreme Court reviewed the motion for a new trial filed by Murdaugh's defense team and ultimately denied it in early 2025, ruling that while Hill's behavior had been inappropriate and her book had been problematic, the evidence did not establish that her conduct had actually affected the jury's verdict. The original convictions stood. But this chapter of the story added a layer of complexity that will likely fuel debate about this case for years to come. The integrity of the proceedings, a foundational element of any criminal conviction, had been called into question. And while the courts ruled that the verdict was not compromised, the very fact that such questions arose in the aftermath of this trial is something that cannot simply be set aside. Now let's pause here and sit with something that very few discussions of this case spend enough time on. Alec Murdaugh appealed his conviction. His legal team filed multiple motions and appeals, including the challenge based on Becky Hill's conduct. And while the South Carolina Supreme Court denied the motion for a new trial in early 2025, his attorneys have continued to pursue avenues of appeal. This means that as of the time of this script, the legal story of Alec Murdaugh is not completely finished. The convictions have been upheld at the state level. He is serving 2 consecutive life sentences, but the legal proceedings have not been fully exhausted. He has also faced, separately from the murder trial, a significant series of financial crime charges. In November of 2023, he pleaded guilty to a large number of fraud and financial crime charges in state court, related to the alleged misappropriation of millions of dollars from clients of his firm over the course of roughly 20 years. He was sentenced to additional consecutive prison time on those charges. And yet, through all of this, the murder convictions, the financial crime pleas, the appeal denials, the sentences, Alec Murdaugh has continued to maintain that he did not kill Maggie and Paul. That insistence is either the statement of an innocent man trapped inside a miscarriage of justice, or is the final, unyielding performance of a man who spent his entire life learning how to project whatever image the moment required. The question of which one it is, that is the question that keeps people awake at night. In the months after the verdict, several jurors spoke to media about their experience. What they described was a jury that had been extraordinarily attentive. They took notes. They followed the testimony closely. They analyzed what they were seeing not just in terms of the explicit evidence, but in terms of the overall picture that emerged from its accumulation. Several jurors spoke about the emotional moments, specifically the moments when Alec Murdaugh wept on the stand. They were not unmoved by the tears. They watched them carefully, but they also watched what happened around the tears, the way the emotion appeared and then subsided, the moments when grief seemed to compete with the calculation of a practiced legal mind. One of the things that jurors identified as most significant was not a dramatic moment, but something quieter and more structural. It was the accumulation of lies. Not one lie, not two, but a documented, established pattern. Alec Murdaugh changing his account whenever confronted with evidence that contradicted it. The cell phone data forced one change. The Snapchat video forced another. The financial records established systematic deception spanning years. The jury, sitting in that courtroom day after day, watching that pattern emerge piece by piece, reached a conclusion that did not require 3 days or 3 weeks to communicate. 3 hours. Because in 3 hours, 12 people had looked at the pattern and said, "We have seen enough." The Murdaugh case left a wound on Hampton County that has not closed easily. For the members of the community who had grown up with the Murdaugh name as a symbol of legal authority and community standing, the revelation of what had allegedly been happening beneath the surface was not just a criminal story. It was a reckoning with the nature of power and the ways in which power can be abused over long periods of time without sufficient accountability. Several of the clients from whom funds were allegedly misappropriated, including, as we discussed, the family of Gloria Satterfield, pursued civil proceedings to recover what had been lost. The Murdaugh law firm itself faced scrutiny and legal proceedings related to the firm's knowledge or lack thereof of the misconduct that had allegedly been occurring within it. The boating death of Mallory Beach, the 2019 accident that had triggered the civil proceedings and created financial pressure, remained a source of profound grief for her family. Her parents attended portions of the murder trial, watching a case unfold that was connected in significant ways to the loss they had already experienced. The community's relationship with the Murdaugh legacy had to be reconstructed from a very different set of facts than the ones most people had believed were true. And the legal community in South Carolina had to confront questions about whether the influence of the Murdaugh name had, over the years, allowed certain things to be overlooked, certain investigations to proceed less aggressively than they otherwise might have. These are questions that a criminal verdict, however significant, cannot fully resolve. That examination is ongoing. Here is where we land. Here is where every honest examination of this case eventually arrives. Alec Murdaugh was convicted of murdering his wife and his son. The evidence, the forensic analysis, the timeline established by cell data and digital evidence, the documented lies, the motive built on financial desperation, all pointed in one direction. The jury agreed, unanimously, in 3 hours. And yet, the question of motive, when you really sit with it, does not resolve cleanly. The prosecution's theory was that he needed a distraction, that he needed sympathy, that he needed to buy time before the financial exposure that was coming. But students of this case, legal analysts, criminal psychologists, journalists who have covered it in depth, have raised the question of whether killing his wife and son could realistically have achieved those goals. Killing Maggie and Paul would not have erased the financial records. It would not have stopped the civil proceedings. It would not have destroyed the documents that his firm's own accounting staff were already examining. Whatever distraction a murder might create, it would be temporary, and the permanent consequences would be catastrophic. Some analysts have suggested that what the murder of Maggie and Paul may have represented was not a calculated strategic move, but something far more psychologically complex. A moment in which the person about to witness his complete unraveling was, in some terrible calculus, perceived as the greatest threat to whatever remained of his self-image. Maggie had been married to this man for decades. She knew him. As he stood at the edge of total exposure, her knowledge of who he truly was may have represented something he found unbearable. This is not the prosecution's stated motive. It is not a legal finding. It is a question that analysts have raised when looking at the totality of this case. And it is a question that a conviction, however deserved, does not close. Because we can know what happened, at least to the degree that 12 jurors found the evidence convincing beyond a reasonable doubt. What is harder to know, what may never be fully resolved, is the interior truth of what happened inside one man's mind on that June evening. There is one more question that genuinely haunts this case, and we want to leave you with it. Alec Murdaugh says he did not do it. He has said it consistently. He said it on the stand. He said it sentencing. His attorneys have pursued it in appeals. If the forensic evidence is what the prosecution said it was, if the timeline is what the witnesses and data established, if the pattern of lies is as documented as the evidence suggests, then his continued insistence seems, to most observers, to be the final act of a man who cannot step outside the performance even now. But here is the question you should ask yourself. If you are wrong, not about the evidence, but about what it means, if there is any gap, any unexplored alternative, any piece of information that has not yet come to light? Would you know it? Would the system that convicted him find it? That question is not a defense of Alec Murdaugh. It is not a challenge to the verdict. It is what true crime, at its most honest, always forces us to confront. The limits of what we know, the fragility of certainty, and the profound weight of decisions made in the absence of complete information. This case is still developing. The appeals, the ongoing implications, they are not finished. Dark Trail Files will be watching. And when new information emerges, we will be here to follow it down the trail. Maggie Murdaugh was 52 years old when she died at the Moselle property on June 7th, 2021. Paul Murdaugh was 22. They were a mother and her youngest son. Whatever the forces and pressures and failures and deceits that surrounded them, they were human beings whose lives ended violently on a quiet evening on a property that was supposed to be their family sanctuary. Their names deserve to be the ones we carry forward from this story. Not the name of the institution that failed them. Not the name of the legacy that was built on sand. Not the name that will spend the rest of its days inside a South Carolina prison. Maggie. And Paul, this has been Dark Trail Files. If this story moved you, challenged you, made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Because the trail does not end here. It never does. We will see you on the next one.